the dawn of biblical narratives, there are characters who appear and vanish like shadows amid great events. One of the figures who has generated the most intrigue and debate is Melchizedek. In the book of Genesis, he appears suddenly as Abram returns from victory over enemy kings. Melchizedek is called King of Salem and priest of God Most High. He offers Abram bread and wine and pronounces a blessing. After this enigmatic encounter, the priest disappears from the story. Centuries later, the letter to the Hebrews mentions Melchizedek again to compare him with Jesus, and notes that he has no father or mother or genealogy, and that his priesthood has neither beginning nor end. This lack of origin and conclusion makes him a disconcerting figure and feeds the imagination. Who was this king and priest? Why was his lineage not recorded when the Bible is meticulous about genealogies? Is it possible that Melchizedek is more than a mere human? These questions open the door to a journey through ancient texts, myths of other cultures, modern interpretations and reflections on the meaning of history. The purpose of this script is to explore the mystery of Melchizedek, following the pattern of our previous scripts. We will examine the biblical text, compare this character with similar figures from other traditions, review contemporary theories, and pause for an open reflection. Throughout the narrative, we invite readers to offer their own conjectures about Melchizedek's identity, revisiting the story, the art of repetition. Reading this account carefully reveals nuances we may have missed on the first pass. Repetition is not redundant. Each revisiting illuminates a new facet. By moving through the same words again, we immerse ourselves deeper into the atmosphere of mystery. Each sentence becomes an echo inviting us to contemplate Melchizedek and his equivalents in other traditions more deeply. Retelling the story creates a rhythm like meditation, where repetition does not bore, but awakens consciousness. This method allows ideas to multiply and reflection to expand until all corners of the topic are explored. The biblical narrative. To understand who Melchizedek is, we must begin with Genesis 14. The chapter describes a war in which a coalition of kings invades the cities of the Salt Sea Plain and captures Lot. Abram gathers his trained servants, pursues the captors northward, and rescues his nephew. On the way back, he meets Melchizedek, described as King of Salem and priest of God Most High. Melchizedek offers Abram bread and wine, gestures of hospitality and perhaps ritual, and blesses Abram in the name of God Most High, praising that God for the victory. The text emphasizes that Melchizedek was priest of a God whom Abram recognized as his own, suggesting a shared monotheistic understanding. Surprisingly, Melchizedek appears neither before nor after in Genesis. His figure stands like an isolated pillar in Abram's story. The letter to the Hebrews revisits Melchizedek to explain the superiority of Jesus' priesthood. The author of Hebrews says Melchizedek is without father, mother, or genealogy, and has neither beginning of days nor end of life, making him akin to the Son of God. The letter claims Melchizedek remains a priest forever. These details led early Christians to see in Melchizedek a type of Christ, an eternal priest preceding the law and independent of Levitical genealogy. This interpretation has dominated Christian theology, but leaves many questions open about Melchizedek's identity and what he represented to the original audience. The identity of Salem Genesis calls Melchizedek King of Salem. Traditionally, Salem has been associated with Jerusalem, though some scholars have proposed it referred to a northern city called Shechem. In the Bible, the only direct connection between Salem and Jerusalem is Psalm 76, where Salem poetically refers to Zion. Samaritan writings mention an alternative tradition in which the scene occurred near Mount Gerizim. Interestingly, an historian known as Pseudo-Eupolemos tells that Abraham helped the Phoenicians against the Armenians and was received by Melchizedek, priest and king, at a temple called Ar-Gerizim. This variant suggests Melchizedek circulated in extra-biblical stories. Whether it refers to Jerusalem or another sacred city, Melchizedek holds a dual title, king and priest. In antiquity, this implies a figure uniting political and religious power. Another striking feature is the blessing he pronounces. He blesses Abram and acknowledges God Most High as creator of heaven and earth. After the blessing, the Hebrew text states that he gave him a tenth of everything, but Spanish translations typically say Abram gave a tithe to Melchizedek. The original's ambiguity has fueled debates about who honored whom, reflecting the intention to emphasize Melchizedek's superior status as priest of the Most High. Jewish and Christian traditions have offered various interpretations of Melchizedek's identity. Some medieval Jewish commentators identified him with Shem, Noah's son, arguing that Shem was alive in Abraham's time according to some chronologies. Others thought he was an angel or celestial being serving in the heavenly temple. The Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria equated Melchizedek with the Logos, God's word, in an attempt to harmonize philosophy and scripture. In Christian tradition, the letter to the Hebrews asserts that Jesus is priest according to the order of Melchizedek, and that his priesthood is eternal because it does not depend on genealogy or the Mosaic law. Some ancient theologians saw Melchizedek as a pre-incarnate manifestation of Christ, a theophany of the Word before the incarnation. Others thought he was a powerful angel officiating in the heavenly sanctuary. In Islam, an alternative proposal saw Melchizedek as Al-Khidr, a mysterious immortal being who instructed Moses and will appear at the end of time. All these interpretations reflect the impact of Melchizedek's brief appearance in Genesis and its reinterpretation in Hebrews. The lack of biographical data allowed religious imagination to roam, from identifying him with known figures to the idea of a distinct supernatural being, kings and priests in the ancient world. To better understand, it is helpful to compare him with other ancient figures who combined earthly rule with religious mediation. In Sumer, a civilization flourishing in Mesopotamia in the 4th millennium BCE, a system developed in which the king was also a priest. In the city of Uruk, when the population grew and worship needed organizing, a man was appointed to act as priest-king. This figure, depicted with beard, long tunic and shepherd's cap, tended animals and oversaw sacrifices on behalf of the community. His function was to intercede with the gods to guarantee good harvests and city stability. The Sumerian word for high priest, En, means husband or lord, suggesting the priest-king was considered consort of the goddess Inanna. Such a monarch acted as mediator between divinity and people, uniting sacred and civil domains. Over time, Sumer's kings became military leaders, Lugal, but the idea of a ruler with religious authority remained in collective memory. Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High, recalls these Sumerian priest-kings who cared for the temple and city and were sometimes seen as husbands of the goddess. Hermes Trismegistus. Another rich comparison comes from the Greco-Egyptian world. Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, is a legendary figure of the Hellenistic era. He arises from the fusion of the Greek god Hermes, messenger and guide of souls, with the Egyptian god Thoth, lord of writing and wisdom. Hermetic traditions claim Hermes Trismegistus wrote a series of texts, the Hermetica, covering astrology, magic, alchemy, and philosophy. These writings offer wisdom uniting knowledge of the material and spiritual worlds and influenced mystical currents. In Ptolemaic Egypt, devotees built temples to worship Hermes and Thoth as a single divinity teaching divine secrets. Hermes Trismegistus was said to be an ancient sage who understood the cosmos's structure, the stars' motion, and the power of the spoken word. Many Renaissance Christian thinkers believed Hermes was a pagan prophet who announced divine truth long before Moses. According to one tradition, Hermes was a contemporary of Enoch, Noah, and even Abraham, transmitting knowledge of astronomy and medicine. The image of Hermes as king, priest, and master of sacred science, without clear origin and able to bridge cultures, resembles Melchizedek's role as mediator of knowledge. In Mesoamerica, we find an interesting parallel in Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Among the Mexica and other groups, Quetzalcoatl was a god of life, light, and knowledge. His name combines Quetzal, a bird with green feathers, and Coatl, serpent, suggesting the union of sky and earth. In Aztec beliefs, Quetzalcoatl was associated with wind, the planet Venus, dawn, merchants, and the arts. He was patron of priesthood, education, and learning. He was credited with inventing the calendar, discovering maize and creating humanity. Some stories describe him as a god who took human form and ruled Tolan, teaching people to cultivate, write, and live in order. Other myths recount his departure eastward with a promise to return. The mixture of serpent and bird conveys the idea of a being connecting underworld and firmament, and his role as knowledge bearer makes him a Mesoamerican equivalent of civilizing teachers. In this sense, Quetzalcoatl can be compared with Melchizedek as a sovereign priest who shares divine knowledge with humans and whose origin is mysterious. Quetzalcoatl's role in bringing maize and the calendar also recalls the Mesopotamian Apkallu sages who taught crafts to humanity and were punished by the gods. Modern theories. Melchizedek's enigmatic character has inspired diverse theories in modern times. Some researchers argue that Melchizedek was a real man, perhaps a Canaanite prince who believed in a supreme god akin to Abram's and established monotheistic worship in Salem. This hypothesis holds that the absence of genealogy in the biblical text is deliberate to emphasize his uniqueness. Others propose that Melchizedek was the patriarch Shem, Abraham's ancestor, whose name was replaced in the story to avoid confusion. There are also those who believe he was an angel or a spirit administering divine justice. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, particularly the fragment known as 11Q Melchizedek, portrays Melchizedek as a being who leads the final war against Belial's forces and executes God's judgment. In that text, he is called King of Righteousness and is described as leader of the sons of light who frees captives and proclaims God's favor. This document shows that some Jewish communities in the 1st century BCE saw Melchizedek as a heavenly being with an army of saints. In Christian tradition, the idea emerged that Melchizedek was an earlier manifestation of Christ. Hebrews emphasizes that he is without father, mother, or genealogy, and resembles the Son of God, nurturing belief in a pre-incarnate appearance of the Word. Other modern interpretations, influenced by esotericism and science fiction, speculate that Melchizedek might have been a visitor from another dimension, or an immortal being who delivered secret knowledge to Abram, essentially a messenger from a wider cosmic order. These theories, though lacking empirical basis, show how Melchizedek continues to fascinate contemporary imagination. Symbolic and philosophical reflections. Beyond theories, Melchizedek raises symbolic and philosophical questions. That he is described as without genealogy and eternal suggests he transcends ordinary categories of time and kinship. In one sense, he can be seen as an archetype of the divine human, a figure participating in both human and heavenly realms. By offering bread and wine, Melchizedek anticipates communion rites in various religions, becoming a symbol of hospitality and covenant. His sudden appearance and immediate departure evoke the incursion of the transcendent into human history, a moment when the divine manifests to bestow blessing, then retreats, leaving an echo that resonates through the centuries. Read in dialogue with ancient cultures, Melchizedek shares traits with Mesopotamian priest-kings, Hermetic sages in Egypt, and civilizing gods in Mesoamerica. All these figures combine temporal authority with spiritual wisdom and act as mediators between heaven and earth. This coincidence may indicate that humanity, at different times and places, has intuited the need for leaders who not only govern, but have access to the sacred. It may also signal repeated cultural patterns because they respond to a common experience, the perception that knowledge comes from a transcendent source, and possessing it entails responsibility. Melchizedek could then represent humanity's shadow and light, the possibility of receiving divine wisdom, and the risk of failing to recognize its origin. Open questions. At the end of this exploration, many questions remain, inviting readers to reflect and propose their own hypotheses. Is Melchizedek simply a literary character created to highlight God Most High's greatness and prepare the way for Jesus? Or is he a memory of earlier traditions in which priest-kings played a central role? How can we explain that different cultures have myths about beings who deliver forbidden knowledge or unite political and spiritual power? Can Melchizedek be compared with Hermes Trismegistus or Quetzalcoatl without forcing parallels? What does it mean that he has no origin or end of days? Could he represent the idea that true priesthood and kingship belong to the realm of the eternal? Is there a possibility that he is a messenger from an unknown cosmic order, one of those watchers who, according to some texts, cross boundaries between worlds? And finally, what does the mystery of Melchizedek tell us about our own quest for meaning, about the need to connect knowledge with ethics and spirituality?